Thank you so much today. Our guest, Bob Wilkie, a former professional hockey player and the current founder of I Got Mine, for joining us on the Inherent Risk podcast. Thank you so much, Bob.
Happy to be here, Joel.
So I just wanted to start off asking you, this is a podcast all about the risks of concussions in sports. So I wanted to ask you right off the bat, were you aware of the risks of concussions throughout your own professional playing career? And how has your education and your awareness kind of changed since then?
It's been an amazing journey, Joel. I can tell you, when I was growing up back mid 80s, there was not a lot of awareness around concussions. And, we never knew the impact. So it was really interesting as I continued to be a pro through the 90s and seeing some friends start to have some issues, having issues with concussions myself. Fortunately, nothing long term, but still impactful and scary. And, it's been great that the awareness has changed because I have a lot of friends that are, suffering long term from it.
Yeah, and I was curious, what were some of the ways that concussions affected your life, both, on the ice and off the ice as well, because that's really the untalked about thing with concussions.
I remember the first one that I really had, growing up, you get your bell rung, right? That was the term that they used. You get your bell rung. And we were playing in the Max Midget Hockey Tournament here in Calgary, and it was the championship game. And it got taken down and smacked my head off the ice. And I had never felt anything like it before. Dizzy, vomiting, didn't know where I was. And it was terrifying because, as athletes, we're pretty tough and, separated shoulders and you get stitches and you do those things. But, when you can't think straight, when you don't know where you are, it's a terrifying experience. And that was the first of quite a few that I was unfortunate to have. But it's a scary thing for a lot of people. And I think it's great that it's not discounted anymore. That there are so many good protocols in place to really help the athletes be safe.
Yeah, it's one of those tough things, for me. The reason why I started this podcast is because I've suffered 4 concussions myself. And, I never really played any higher level of hockey, but it was just like you told, I was never aware of the risk growing up, and I wasn't really aware of it till I started dealing with it. And it was kind of a very harsh reality for me to realize how bad it was.
As I got into junior, you have a couple more, you become lethargic. I know for me, I became very hesitant and frightened to go out there, especially after one, because, you don't want to have that feeling again. And at that point, there was no science behind, well, you can only have so many or those types of things. So you just kind of kept playing with it. And even though you didn't feel right for a week or two, you were still out there doing the things. And it was really hard because there was a lot of pressure for you to perform. And you didn't want to tell anybody that you were struggling with stuff. And I think that's where a lot of athletes, even today, with all the protocols, they don't want to be taken out. They don't want to, give up their spot in the lineup. So they'll fight through it. And what they need to know is that, you can heal a shoulder, you can replace a knee and a hip, but you cannot do anything when that brain is damaged.
And it seems to go back to the culture thing with hockey. You mentioned about not losing your spot, and that whole idea of get knocked down, get back up. And if you're perceived as weak, some people might not, think that you're worthy of being in the lineup, and that's really a mental thing that they don't talk about and they don't warn you about.
No, whatever sport it is, you're seeing more come out in soccer. There's always been a problem in football. I think that a lot of people are being enlightened with some of the tragedies that have happened. And, when you get to those certain levels, and even for a young person to be playing at the highest level that they can, the coach has huge expectations and my future depends on it. And, it just makes us not really take things into consideration because I know as a young athlete, I never thought that the injuries I was suffering was going to be a problem as I got older. I can tell you they absolutely are. And for anybody that's out there that's, young and aspiring, you just don't want to mess with your head. You do everything you need to make sure that it's in a good spot, because it will affect you for the rest of your life. And that's a long time.
It's a long time, and that's really important. And, on a related topic on hockey culture, do you think that it creates kind of a stigma, both in terms of around concussions and in terms of mental health?
Oh, 100%. Unfortunately, there's so many stigmas that are out there. You got to be tough. You got to suck it up. You got to play. And if you don't show your worth today, then you might be out of a job tomorrow. So, that that pressure to perform and the consistency and internal competition within a team, can be a recipe for disaster for a lot of young people. And it's not until, we start to realize that it is about our health long term. And if that means that I've got to sit out for a couple of weeks, and then that's what I have to do for my long term health.
It's very important, and we talk about mental health, and people not wanting to talk about it. And I was watching your story, and I know a lot about the fact that you were part of the Swift Current Broncos bus crash, and just it was such a severely tragic incident, and so much I can sure was not talked about, what all you teens were going through at the time, and just the mental aspect of it. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, and if that had anything to do with the inspiration behind starting I Got Mine.
You know what? It didn't originally, Joel. I just trying to survive, like so many other people out there. All of my teammates, we were just trying to move on. And, it's very similar to any kind of injury. We can become traumatized. And, working with young athletes today in all different sports, really find, when you have a long-term injury, it does mess with your head. We do become traumatized. And, that rewires our brains to how we think and how we operate. And it's just so important to understand that, that healing process and giving yourself the right amount of time, talking to people when you need it. That's what really started to happen for me, and how I Got Mine came to be. And a retired player at 2000, being 30 years old, and looking back going, what the hell happened? Where did it not pan out the way that I wanted it to be? And why do I feel the way I do? And so really started researching and learning just so I could feel good again. And as I started to find those answers, I realized a lot of the young athletes I was coaching were going through the same thing. So I identified that there was a real need. And, it was tough back 2008 when you said that you were going to come in and talk about mental health and wellness. And, a lot of people still didn't feel comfortable enough to do that. But here we are in 2021, and, it's front and center. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and then flash forward about 32 years later in 2018, and the whole hockey world was kind of aware what happened with the Humboldt Broncos, and it's something that touched everyone. I at the time was actually working at the Hockey Hall of Fame, and actually got to meet some of the families about 6 months later. And I remember at the time I was going through my concussion stuff, and just getting to meet these people. And I thought, I was going through so much, and it just put so much into perspective. And for your own sake, you were one of the first people to lend your help and your expertise. So I'm wondering, how you were able to deal with that without bringing up some post-traumatic, incidents for yourself.
The first night, Joel, I'm not going to lie, I was very scared. It'd take me 20 years to get rid of those nightmares that I had about that day. And when I went to bed, I was able to fall asleep, and I woke up the next day, and that's when I knew I was okay, that I could go and help other people. And it was a terrible incident that happened in Humboldt. It was great to see how far the world had come, because when we went through it in '86, there was no support, other than the community that was around and the families, obviously, but there was no professional support. When we were in Humboldt, man, it was just filled with people, professionals that could try and help. And, the ongoing support and the resources that the family had available. We just didn't have those in '86. So it's nice to see that the world has changed that much, that when something like that happens, that there are the proper supports in place so that people can learn what they're going to have to get back to life.
Yeah, and that incident, really hit home for anyone that's been on any sports team and travel on a bus. And it's just one of those things where it's just so eye-opening, because that really, really can happen to anyone.
It's life, it's waiting out there, and we don't know when it's going to be. As much as we want to prepare, we just never know when it's going to happen. And I think it's so important that people are working on themselves to eliminate as much of the stress and anxiety and depression that we can, that stems from sports, that stems from injuries like concussion, that stems from toxic environments where there's a lot of stigma. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, a lot of that stuff is still going on. We saw it come out in the NHL last year. And, a lot of people are talking about the baggage that they've been carrying for 20 years. So it's critically important that we understand it's our responsibility as individuals to do something about it. If we're going to wait, if we're going to hide, you're going to stay in that pain. So, be brave, be courageous, and stand up and say, you know what, I think I need to chat with somebody about the things that I'm going through.
Yeah, I know in my own experience, some of the people I knew, closest to me didn't even know what I was going through. And it wasn't until I really started talking about it and telling my story and really expressing myself where they kind of figured out that, I was dealing with something and there was a way to get past
And Joel, I'd be really curious. So why did you wait so long to tell somebody?
it. To be honest, I for so long, so I had two concussions. I got a third one that really kind of like turned my life upside down. And for so long, I couldn't accept the fact that my life was never going to get back to normal. I couldn't accept that I wasn't going to be on the hockey team I was playing on. I couldn't accept that I wasn't going to be able to be the same active person I was. And so for so long, I just was always hoping that, maybe would get back there one day. And it wasn't really till I accepted that, there's something that I can deal with, but I have to work with it. And every day it's been something that I've been working on. And truly that it was a, eye-opening experience for me to talk about it and really be vulnerable like I hadn't been in ever.
And that's one of the things that we've really learned, Joel, is that story that you just shared. Um, a lot of times we don't know what to do. We don't know how to have that conversation. It's not that we don't want to talk. And I'm sure, Joel, that you wanted to talk to people at certain times. You just didn't know what to say or how to say it. And, that's, Bell, Let's Talk is a great example. Okay, great. Let's talk. What the hell do I say? I don't even know how to start this conversation. And that's half the battle. So, I think you gave a great description of what everybody out there can feel like when they encounter what you did, a very traumatic incident, which makes your future uncertain. And then, the wheels fall off and we can struggle mightily. How many times did somebody, come to you and say, I noticed there's a difference and what's wrong and how can I help? And you completely shut them down.
To be honest, not the only people that would ever come to me would be people that I either had a concussion, my younger brother had been through concussions, or a friend on my team had been through concussions. But really, I've told this story a bunch on the podcast, that the most troubling part for me was I used to just go even when I was injured because I wanted to be there. I was like the team administrator. I used to do the game sheets. I used to bring the pucks. I knew all the referees. And every week I would get asked by the same 4 or 5 guys on my team, hey, you look fine. Come out and play. We want you out there. And it wasn't that, they were really thinking that they were doing damage to me, but they didn't realize like how, crushing that was. All I wanted to do was be out there, but they just didn't understand at all.
And that's what makes the concussions even worse, because it's not something that people can see.
Mhm.
And that's the unfortunate part about it. It's like mental health. It's it's the silent illness, right? You can appear to be fine on the outside, but inside, it's pure chaos and uncertainty. And I think that's where we really have to work at eliminating that stigma and support the people as best we can, rather than judge them or condemn them because they look fine.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the idea that like, you have some former teammates or opponents that have been struggling with it, or, God forbid some of them have actually passed away. I'm wondering like how much of an impact does that have on you on a day-to-day basis?
I'm grateful, Joel, to be honest, that I was able to get through unscathed with the amount of concussions that I had. The last one happened in 95 and it was pretty bad. It took me out of the lineup for quite a while. It wasn't until much later, 97, 98, when it really started to show with a lot of my friends and in some of the conversations, and they were talking about what they were struggling with and how they were not coping and again, isolating a lot and really not participating in conversation or bringing it up so that they could get the proper help. That it was really scary, and that I felt very fortunate. And it's hard when you see posts on Facebook or you have conversations and you hear what a struggle it is. I empathize very much with them, but I don't know what that's like. And I think that's the hard part for me is I want to help, but I don't know how to help. And unfortunately, they don't know what they need either. A lot of times when we're in that space, Joel, we just don't know. So it can be quite frustrating knowing that they need help, but not knowing what to do.
And I'll add on a related topic. We talk so much on this podcast about hockey players or athletes in general kind of facing this identity crisis when they retire. It's something they've dedicated towards their whole life, and then it ends abruptly, and it's what now? And I feel like that's something that happens so often with people that are dealing with concussion symptoms.
There's shame, There's embarrassment, there's regret, again, because it's not something that somebody could see where you, shatter your leg and it's just not possible. Um, we are becoming more educated to understand the damage that it does do to the brain. So it is alleviating some of that pressure. But the transition, even when it's a good transition from athlete to real life, is not an easy one because, as athletes, our whole identity is as an athlete. And what we really try and work with the young athletes of today is to make sure that they're not setting themselves up for that pain, to understand that they're a person first who likes to play the sport that they do, who happens to be very good at the sport that they like to do. But you're always a person first. Your sport does not define who you are. It's something that you enjoy doing. And it's really important that the young people out there that are listening understand that, you're not a hockey player. You're a person who likes to play hockey, and that's a big difference.
That's a huge difference. That's a very important point that it doesn't define you. I'll add, a problem with hockey. I find I coached a select team a couple of years, and I find some hockey players now you're committed to the sport 12 months of the year, 7 days of the week. There's no time for the kids to get some other hobbies or hang out with other friends or other play other sports. Even it's almost like they're just trapped within the world, and once they get out of it, yeah, what do they do now?
And it's been really interesting, Joel, the past dozen years, especially, that's come to the forefront where they're not athletes anymore. They're hockey players or they're baseball players. An athlete was somebody who participated in all the sports. And, as we were growing up, we had that opportunity with the different seasonal, but, the competition is so intense out there now that the parents really are causing a lot of problems because these young people, they're good at a sport. They get introduced as, Bob the hockey player, and they like that. It starts to give them a sense of who they are, and they grab onto it with all their might and don't want to give it up, and they give up everything else. And the athletes of today are very one-dimensional, and that leads to very dangerous futures for all of them, because when you ask for everything, like I did from hockey, I asked hockey to produce everything for me, my fame, my fortune, my opportunity. It can only give so much. So you're always going to be disappointed by the sport that you're in because you're asking too much of the sport. And I think if you can really start to find that balance and find some other interests, we try and get young athletes playing guitar, doing models, fly fishing and tying flies, something else that they can feel emotionally filled up from, because the sport's only going to give you so much. And if you're constantly demanding that it gives you more, you're going to be empty. If you're empty, you're angry. And if you're angry, you're not performing well and you're not fun to be around.
No, absolutely not. That's a really important point. I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit more about, what the inspiration behind starting I Got Mine was and some of the great programs that you're doing now.
The pain, Joel, to be honest, was so great as a young person for my family, for my dad, who was my biggest cheerleader and supporter, and my mom, my younger brother. Like, it really tore us apart. So I didn't want, and my dad, before he passed away, we would spend, countless hours in the middle of the night talking about all the mistakes that we made. And he kept telling me, Bobby, you got to go and educate these people and try and help them so that they don't make the mistakes that we did. And 2008 was when I really made the decision. I love to coach, but I couldn't coach anymore. I realized that I could help so many more people if I took on this venture. And I've been throughout North America in locker rooms and gymnasiums and family rooms, really trying to help and support the people that are struggling out there. So, it's eliminating the pain, it's increasing the awareness, trying to help people understand the skills that are required, the damage that can be done. And if we do it right, this will be something that we remember for the rest of our lives in a positive way. And it's not going to cause a lot of the issues that we still see today.
And it's interesting, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that's something that's really brought on stressors and added, people that are dealing with mental health issues. So I'm wondering if that's something that been a challenge that you guys have had to deal with.
It's been a big problem, Joel. With the shutdown and the end of careers, some people that were in their last year, university students, professionals. It's not the way that you want it to end. It's been ongoing. So, even for the players that are coming back, we're finding that it's not what you would think it typically would be for an athlete. Oh, thank God I finally get to go play. There's so much stress with all that they have to do to abide by the COVID rules.
Right.
Nothing is the same. The seasons aren't starting at the same time. We can't do the same things we've always done at the rink and at practice, and there's no fans in the building. So it has absolutely increased the stress of the athletes so much. And the thing about athletes is we're really good at shoving everything down and suppressing everything. And the problem that we're seeing is it no longer can be shoved down. It's starting to surface. And, a lot of athletes out there are really struggling. They're scared. They're fearful. They don't know what to do. And that's who we're trying to support and help right now.
Yeah, and it's really important. And I'll add, some of those, if they're younger kids, probably don't understand the magnitude of what's going on right now. And just to them, they don't have their hockey team or their friends or their sport team to be around. And it could be crushing if they just, they don't understand it.
It's been really amazing, Joel. We did see that at the beginning, and the groups that we worked with, and typically we work with the team where they enroll in our online courses. We get together once a week after they finished a lesson, and we do a facilitated conversation with our team of professionals and really try and deepen the understanding of, okay, this is how you feel, and this is where we want to get you to, but here's the work that you have to do. They'll typically participate in 2 to 3 courses over the length of a season. And what we're seeing on the other side are these kids have strategies, they have plans. They're not happy about the situation that they're in, but they can deal with the situation that they're in. And it's not causing any more long-term damage. And that's the power of what we do here, through education, through knowledge. And the commitment of the players, right? They're all committed to their careers and themselves. And that's what makes the ultimate difference in how they feel and how they'll be in the future.
For sure. And you said education and awareness. That's the 2 reasons why I want to do this podcast, or specifically about concussions, is I want to educate, the next generation of hockey players or any athletes out there that, there are risks to the sport. And as well, it's something that you really can be dealing with later in life. And just, I hate to use that word risk, but it's something that I really want them to be aware of.
We all know when we get into sport, Joel, that there's a risk involved. We're just not sure what kind of long-term damage that can create. So we all jump in going, yeah, I'm in. And then it happens like, oh man, I don't know. So I really applaud you for doing that. I know it's probably not easy some days thinking about the things that you've gone through, but it's people like you, Joel, that are really going to move the needle and create the awareness. So thanks for doing this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, 2 more questions here. One, do you think you would pursue the same hockey career, knowing what you know now, both about concussions and about mental health?
It's actually a question I get asked a lot, and I blow people's minds when they hear my story, and I say, absolutely, I'd do it all over again. If I could have the awareness, if there was programs like we have, and I could become educated and learn some things, I think there's a different ending to it. But all those experiences, and that's the thing that people maybe don't understand is, we go through the bad so that we can know and enjoy the good. And it's not all going to be good. That's just not part of the journey. I would 100% do it again because it's made me who I am today, and it allows me to support and help the people that we have been helping for the last 13 years.
That's very important, and I applaud you as well for being able to create that support system, especially for younger athletes. It's very crucial. And I guess the one final question I have to ask is just the best piece of advice you could give to anyone out there that's dealing with a concussion.
Start talking. Let people know how you're doing. Understand that if you do what you need to do to heal you, you can get to a better place. And whether some of the symptoms are, you're being told are going to be long-term, you're still going to need strategies to deal with it. Anytime we go through any change in life, we have to learn new ways to live. And if you're suffering terribly, keep your head up, keep talking, and know that you can make it better if you're committed to getting better. I know it's a huge challenge out there, but you really have to be able to see that light and do all the things to take care of yourself. It's not something we do well, Joel, is take care of ourselves. It comes across as selfish, but like we always like to say, is you are the most important person in your life. And if you're no good for you, then you can't really be good for anybody else. So place a little more importance on your own well-being and do whatever is required to get to the place where you need to be.
That's a really great piece of advice. And generally, I just really enjoy talking to you and hearing your positive mindset. So I do really thank you so much. I have one little last surprise for you. I actually have a Bob Wilkie rookie card that I pulled from my collection. So yeah, thank
My
you.
kid, my young son looks at that picture and says, "That's not you, Dad." I agree with you. That wasn't me. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
well,
great.
again, yeah, thank you so much for talking to me today and really continue doing the great work that you are doing. And I'd love to chat with you in the future.
If anybody's looking for help out there, you can find us at igotmine.ca. And again, Joel, I really thank you for allowing me to be here and continue to do the great work that you're doing.